Noel Chavasse was a pacifist and a religious man, the son of a clergy family. However, as was typical of the period, he also believed in his duty to serve his country. Noel did not enter the church despite his father being the Bishop of Liverpool. Instead, he qualified as a medical doctor and later joined the Royal Army Medical Corps, where his story of courage, self-sacrifice, and exceptional heroism began. During the First World War, Chavasse was a captain with the Royal Army Medical Corps, attached to the Scottish Battalion of the King's Liverpool Regiment. Noel got into trouble with the General Staff by complaining about the organisation of field ambulances, the rampant spread of venereal disease, and the dreadful treatment of shell shock victims who he believed should be helped and not punished for cowardice. The senior officers prosecuting this war viewed this last opinion with utter contempt. They tended to regard those mentally destroyed by war as cowards and malingerers. Quite apart from that, living and working in the hellish environment of the dugout trenches must have been torturous. The lack of proper sanitation and the variable weather with cold, rain and frost, or extremes in temperatures, must have played havoc with the lives of the troops stuck within their below-ground barricades and having to share their lives with disease-ridden rats and other vermin. A common condition was trench foot, brought on by dampness which caused numbness and the odor of skin rot. Intertwined with this misery was the stench of death and the fear of impending doom with each call to go over the top. The nightmarish existence these men were exposed to weakened and sickened them if they hadn't already died by bullet or bayonet. Stoically, perhaps, Chavasse endured these inhospitable conditions and would personally go to his colleagues' aid with a stretcher-bearer if they lay wounded on the battlefield, and often in daylight and under enemy rifle and machine gun fire, without a thought for his safety. Through these actions, he gave light in their hours of darkness and won the admiration of his subordinates. This was a rare quality in the class-conscious society of World War I. His first acknowledged act of bravery occurred in June 1915, when he won a military cross after spending 12 hours rescuing casualties at Ypres. This was followed in August 1916, when he was awarded his first Victoria Cross for saving around 20 men while wounded at Guillemont on the Somme. His citation for the award read,
"During an attack he tended the wounded in the open all day under heavy fire, frequently in view of the enemy. During the ensuing night, he searched for wounded on the ground in front of the enemy's lines for 4 hours. Next day he took one stretcher-bearer to the advanced trenches and, under heavy shell fire, carried an urgent case for 500 yards into safety, being wounded in the side by a shell splinter during the journey. The same night he took up a party of 20 volunteers, rescued 3 wounded men from a shell hole 25 yards from the enemy's trench, buried the bodies of 2 officers, and collected many identity discs, although fired on by bombs and machine guns. Altogether, he saved the lives of some 20 badly wounded men, besides the ordinary cases which passed through his hands. His courage and self-sacrifice were beyond praise."
After receiving his first VC, he was offered a surgeon's post away from the front line, but he politely declined and explained in a letter to his parents,
"I have written to the base hospital and said that though I valued the offer very much, I thought I had better stay with the lads. I felt rather depressed about it for a quarter of an hour."
Less than a month later, Noel composed another letter, this time addressed to his beloved fiancée Gladys. Mortally wounded at Casualty Clearing Station 32 near Ypres, he urgently dictated to a nurse,
"Duty called and called me to obey."
During the initial attack of Passchendaele on July 31, 1917, Dr. Chavasse sustained a head injury but steadfastly refused to abandon his post, even with a fractured skull. Time and again he ventured into the treacherous no-man's land to tend to the wounded. In the early hours of August the 2nd, a shell struck Noel's first aid station. His face was unrecognizable from a terrible injury sustained, and suffering from a severe stomach wound, he crawled half a mile in search of help. Tragically, he succumbed to his injuries on August the 4th, leaving behind a legacy of unwavering dedication and sacrifice at the tender age of 32. His full citation for his posthumous VC award read,
"Though severely wounded early in the action, whilst carrying a wounded soldier to the dressing station, Captain Chavasse refused to leave his post, and for 2 days not only continued to perform his duties, but in addition went out repeatedly under heavy fire to search for and attend to the wounded who were lying out. During these searches, although practically without food during this period, worn with fatigue and faint with his wound, he assisted in carrying in a number of badly wounded men over heavy and difficult ground. Through his extraordinary energy and inspiring example, he was instrumental in rescuing many wounded who would have otherwise undoubtedly succumbed under the bad weather conditions. This devoted and gallant officer subsequently died of his wounds."
Chavasse, incidentally, not only rescued British soldiers, but also wounded Germans as well. For all intents and purposes, he was a very gallant, empathic human being whose only interest was to help and save human lives. Although he hated war and saw its horrors daily, he never gave up on his religious beliefs and his sense of duty to his country and humanity by serving on the front lines. This exceptional man was buried with full military honors in Brandhoek New Military Cemetery, Vlamertinge, Belgium. His headstone carries uniquely a representation of 2 Victoria Crosses, and here he lays for eternity with his comrades in arms for whom he cared so much about.